I remember the exact moment my life stopped being mine. I was 17, sitting in the courtyard with my sketchbook, lost in a drawing of a world that didn't exist, one where I was free. My mother's voice cut through the summer air, gentle, but trembling. "Your uncle has found a wonderful match for you," she said. My pencil froze midline. I didn't understand at first. "A match?" I asked. Her eyes darted away. She talked about family honor, tradition, and how this was the way things were done. I tried to laugh it off, thinking it was some strange joke. But then my father stepped in, his hand firm on my shoulder. "You will marry him. It is decided." The words hit me like a stone to the chest. I didn't even know his name. That night, I overheard hushed whispers about dowry, alliances, and how this marriage would solve many problems for our family. None of those problems were mine, yet I was expected to be the solution. I stared at the ceiling in the dark, my heartbeat pounding in my ears. It felt like the walls were closing in. I had always been told obedience was a virtue, but for the first time in my life, I began to question if blind obedience was just another word. For chains dot and deep down, I knew I was about to be trapped in a life I didn't choose. 2 weeks later, I found myself dressed in a pale pink shalwar kameez, sitting in a living room that smelled faintly of cardamom tea. The man I was supposed to marry sat across from me. He was older, much older than I expected. His eyes scanned me the way someone inspects an object before purchase. He asked no questions about me, my interests, or my dreams. Instead, he spoke to my father about how obedience and modesty were the most important qualities in a wife. I sat there, silent, my fingers digging into the fabric of my dress. When our eyes finally met, there was no warmth, only calculation. He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. After they left, my father looked pleased. He is from a respected family. "You'll be secure for life?" I wanted to scream. I don't want to be secure. I want to be alive. That night, I cried into my pillow until the fabric was damp, the sound muffled so no one would hear. But the worst part wasn't meeting him. It was the realization that my feelings didn't matter. My fate was being signed away without my consent. That night, I overheard my parents talking in hushed voices. From my bedroom, their words slipped through the thin walls. "She should be grateful," my father said. "Girls like her don't get such offers every day." "She's young," my mother replied, but her tone was more weary than protective. "She's 19. That's old enough. We can't risk waiting." "What if her looks fade?" I sat frozen on my bed, my heart pounding so loudly I feared they might hear it. Girls like her? What did that mean? It hit me my life wasn't my own. My dreams, my education, my independence, all secondary to their planned dot in that moment. Something inside me cracked, but I didn't yet know it was the beginning of a storm. The following week, I ran into Fartan, an old classmate, at the local market. We hadn't spoken in years, but his familiar smile felt like sunlight after weeks of rain dot. We caught up briefly, nothing romantic, just two people exchanging memories. But when I returned home, my mother's sharp eyes caught every detail. "Who is that boy?" she asked. "Just a friend," I said. Her lips tightened. Friends like that are not for girls who are about to be married. That night, my phone was confiscated. My world shrank even smaller. The next morning, my father sat at the breakfast table, his tone calm but heavy with warning. "People are watching. Every move you make reflects on this family. Don't give anyone reason to doubt your character." His words felt like chains around my ankles. It wasn't advice, it was a threat wrapped in fatherly concern. I nodded silently, but inside I was screaming. If even a harmless conversation could tarnish me, then what did they truly see me as? A daughter? Or a transaction waiting to be finalized? I started dropping small hints to my cousin Aaliyah over late night texts, never enough to alarm anyone reading over my shoulder, but enough that she'd sense my distress. Sometimes, I feel like I can't breathe here, I wrote once, praying she'd understand. At a family dinner, I tried to meet my mother's eyes, but she seemed so proud, so convinced I'd been blessed with this match, that my words died in my throat. Every phone call with friends became a game of coded language, hiding cries for help between casual chatter. But it felt like no one could truly hear me. I began to realize no one could save me unless I saved myself. It happened on a rainy evening. I was cooking in the kitchen when his mother walked in, slammed the cabinet door, and accused me of wasting expensive spices. My fiancé entered moments later, his voice low but menacing. "You'll learn to respect the rules here." Then he shoved the plate I prepared onto the floor. The food splattered at my feet like an exclamation point to a warning I could no longer ignore. Something inside me snapped. In that moment, I knew if I stayed, I wouldn't just lose my happiness. I might lose myself entirely. That night, I lay awake, my mind replaying the day's events over and over. My heartbeat was so loud I feared it would wake him. I weighed the odds. If I tried to leave and got caught, the consequences could be worse than anything I'd faced. But staying meant slow destruction. I decided I'd rather risk everything than spend another day as a prisoner in my own life. I began memorizing the household's routines when he left for work, when the front gate was unlocked, and where he kept the spare keys. I began hiding small amounts of cash in an empty lipstick tube. My jewelry gifts from my late grandmother was wrapped in tissue and slipped into the lining of my purse. I told him I needed fresh air to justify brief walks outside secretly, scouting escape routes. I even befriended the security guard at the corner shop, hoping he'd remember me if I disappeared. Every step had to be invisible. My fear was my greatest enemy, but it also sharpened my instincts. It was 4:27 a.m. when I made my move. I slipped out of bed, fully dressed under my nightgown, and crept toward the door. The keys were cold in my trembling hand. My pulse roared in my ears. One wrong noise and it would be over. I unlocked the gate in slow motion, praying the squeak wouldn't wake anyone. Then I ran. Barefoot, I sprinted down the dimly lit street, my breath sharp and uneven. My heart was a drumbeat of panic and hope. Every passing car felt like it could be him. I didn't stop until I reached the bus station where I'd bought the first ticket. I could afford. My hands shook so badly I could barely count the bills. The bus carried me to a city 2 hours away. I called Aaliyah from a payphone, her voice cracked with shock and relief. She picked me up and took me to her apartment, where she locked the door twice and handed me a blanket. For the first time in months, I felt safe enough to cry. The nightmares didn't vanish overnight. I'd wake up sweating, certain I was still trapped. But therapy sessions, late-night talks with Aaliyah, and rediscovering hobbies I loved began to stitch me back together. I learned that healing isn't a straight road. It's full of detours and dark days. But every small victory felt like a reclaiming of my soul. I found a job at a small cafe where the owner didn't just pay me, she encouraged me. Slowly, I began to feel capable again. I saved every paycheck, determined to afford my own apartment. Each day, the woman in the mirror looked a little less like a victim and a little more like someone who had survived. Months later, I stood on a small stage at a women's shelter, sharing my story. I spoke about warning signs, about listening to your gut, about choosing freedom no matter the cost. My voice didn't shake this time. I wasn't just telling my story, I was reclaiming it. I wanted every woman in that room to know, you are stronger than your fears, and there is always a way out.